Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Recently got a question about whether the battleship was escorted or whether she operated alone in combat. And that's one of those things that I thought was so simple that we've never made a video about it before. And many of you who are into this sort of things are like, yeah, of course that's simple. However, I started going through time periods when the ship was escorted versus unescorted, and like everything else we make a video about, there's no easy answer. So, the short answer is the battleship is a capital ship. The battleship does not have her own anti-submarine capability, and her anti-air capability is limited, especially as missiles began to be developed. The ships had a decent anti-aircraft defense in World War II, but virtually nothing was ever added that could help against missiles. The phalanx is the last line of defense, but none of the standard missiles or Tartars or Terriers or anything like that that could shoot down a missile at any sort of safe distance. So, because they're so big, expensive capital ships, and because they're really great in a surface fight, but no good against submarines or aircraft, yes, it was common for battleships to be escorted by smaller vessels. And that's why we're in CEC today. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Today's video is brought to you by Established Titles. Established Titles uses the ancient Scottish tradition of making landowners a laird or lady, lord or lady, by simple merit of owning property in Scotland. So Established Titles allows you to buy as little as 1 square foot of property in Scotland to become a Scottish lord or lady. This is a prefix like Mr. or Mrs. that you can put on things like your plane tickets, your credit cards, and even your dating profiles. That one's my favorite. They send you a certificate like this one. I'm Lord Ryan Szymanski now. Established Titles makes a great last-minute gift idea. Remember, the holiday season is approaching. And they donate to One Trees Planted and Trees for the Future. I absolutely love this environmentalism about the company. Remember to use the discount code BATTLESHIP to get 10% off your next purchase. And the first 200 people who purchase will get a plot right next to mine in the same kingdom. Established Titles makes a great last-minute gift, and they're running an amazing sale right now in addition to our discount code, so go over there soon. Go to establishedtitles.com/battleship and use the discount code BATTLESHIP to get your gifts now and support our channel and our museum.
So, here in CEC, you can see one of our status boards, which is showing the position of Battleship New Jersey and the various other ships in Battle Group Romeo in the late 1980s. So this was a surface action group specifically built around the battleship as the anti-surface warship. However, you notice in addition to the big J at the center here, you've got the cruiser Long Beach fulfilling an air defense warfare role. And you've got frigates and destroyers Thatch, Kirk, and Merrill providing anti-submarine work, as well as a resupply ship, Wabash. Yeah, so that's the short answer. Yes, the battleship would operate as part of a task force. But like I said earlier, looking through the history of the ship, that wasn't always the case. So in the 1980s, she does most of the time when she is transiting to from the Pacific all the way over to the Mediterranean during the Lebanese Civil War. She does a high-speed run by herself just to get there very quickly. She was doing like shakedown exercises, training stuff in the Pacific, and then this problem springs up, and so they have to go through the canal and hightail to the Mediterranean. So she doesn't pick up an escort for that. So even though she's supposed to be escorted, technically that's peacetime, and she doesn't always have an escort. Likewise, during the Vietnam War, Battleship New Jersey was supposed to always be escorted by a guided missile destroyer that could fulfill an anti-air role. The North Vietnamese had a very potent Russian-built missile system. And we were worried that, hey, maybe some of the fast attack missile boats that had attacked the Turner Joy to begin American involvement in Vietnam, or some of their shore-based missiles might reach out at the battleship because she's a high-value target. So New Jersey, along with her one destroyer as escort, leaves Pearl Harbor headed to the war zone. And New Jersey can make over 30 knots. Destroyers can make over 30 knots. It seems like a good match. Except the destroyer, and I'm not going to name any names in this video, couldn't keep up with New Jersey. In rough seas, the lighter displacement of the destroyer causes it to bounce a lot more, and so they often have to operate at below their top speed. Well, that doesn't affect the battleship at all. So the battleship was ranging far ahead of her escort, so much so that Captain Snyder started putting in false position reports every night to the Navy so that it didn't look like he had just left his destroyer behind. So eventually it comes out that these reports are being falsified, and the Navy eventually decides, well, you know what, New Jersey can operate without her escort. And that's how it was for most of the Vietnam deployment. You see, off the coast of Vietnam, while New Jersey might not have a direct escort in her battle group, there are still a ton of Allied vessels operating in those waters. So if New Jersey had some sort of air threat, there are aircraft carriers and aircraft and destroyers and whatnot all operating around her in that combat zone. And so she more or less operates alone, but she's in an area that's very heavily saturated with other American and Allied vessels. It's very similar during the Korean War. New Jersey alternates between escorting the aircraft carriers as part of a carrier task force and operating alone on shore bombardment missions. But again, she is in an area that is controlled by the Allied navies, and she's not the only one doing shore bombardment. There's aircraft carriers are nearby. So yeah, she's more or less operating alone, but there are other ships around her to help if there is some sort of threat to the battleship, which realistically there wasn't. During World War II, Battleship New Jersey usually operated as part of a carrier task force. Sometimes she operated as part of a battleship division, which would have then had cruiser or destroyer divisions operating with her. So for example, during the February 1944 attack on Truk Lagoon, which was commanded from the Space CEC, which was then Admiral Spruance's stateroom. And that is really more how battleships were operated prior to World War II. The slow battleships formed Battle Force United States Navy, which would have been the battleships all in a line, plus the cruisers that were forming their scouting element, the scouting force, and the destroyers that were screening them. So New Jersey's career sees battleships go from being their own task forces to battleships just escorting aircraft carriers, because New Jersey is one of the few battleships fast enough to keep up with the carrier task forces, to battleships operating alone, and then back to battleships operating like aircraft carriers during the Reagan administration as the center of their own battle group that can then be deployed to hotspots around the planet. So again, short answer to this question, yes, battleships typically had escorts, but not as consistently during New Jersey's career as you would expect. So I really appreciate that question. It seems like a really simple question, but it forced us at the museum to do more research, and it gave us content for a video that I would have never thought was a long enough video to produce enough content. So we really appreciate your questions. There's a link in the description below to my Facebook page. At this point, there's so many people on the YouTube channel, it's really hard to get back to all your questions. But if you come over to my Facebook page, I have a much better time of reaching out to you, because we're talking about questions in this episode. If you do have any questions about future things you'd like to see in videos, drop them in the comment section down below. Keep in mind, it usually takes us a couple of weeks to make another video. So if you don't see it the next day, it doesn't mean we didn't look at you. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and we really appreciate the support of the sponsor of today's videos, Established Titles. Remember, there's a link in the description below, establishedtitles.com/battleship. And if you use the discount code Battleship, that'll give you an extra 10% off on top of the holiday sale they're currently running. So great idea now that we're going into the holiday season. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.